Today we're going to look at a vintage lens offered by Konica. And some of the younger photographers may not be familiar with the Konica brand, but Konica is a well-respected optics company that has a long and rich history. Their history goes all the way back to the 1870s, which makes them an older optics company than even Kodak, which is considered one of the oldest photography and optics manufacturers in the world. Now, Konica continued to grow marketing cameras, lenses, and optical equipment through the early part of the 20th century. Of course, World War II disrupted everything. Their supply chains and production facilities were either destroyed or were disrupted. They ceased selling consumer products and only supplied the Japanese army. And after the war, they had to rebuild themselves. And they did this the same way many of the Japanese optics companies did. Nikon, Canon, Olympus, Fujica. They all sought to get a foothold in the American market. It was a large market, and it represented a great way to get back on their financial feet. Now, Konica continued to market lenses, cameras, and other photography equipment from the 50s through the 70s, and they offered high-end, high-quality equipment. But competition was fierce, and by the early 80s their sales were declining, and I think that they just had a lot of trouble. They weren't a large company, they just had a lot of trouble developing and marketing an autofocus system. So Konica eventually merged with Minolta in the early 2000s, and then by 2006 Konica Minolta, the company, sold their photography business to Sony. But during their heyday, they made some amazing lenses, amazing cameras, and were an innovative company. Now, when you're shopping for Konica lenses, there's two types of Konica lenses. There's the Konica Hexanon and the Konica Hexar. And the Hexar lenses are a little more of a low-budget lens that Konica introduced, I believe, in the 70s to try to increase their market share with the budget-minded consumers. But when you're looking for a vintage lens, you should probably look for the Hexanon lenses. They are built better. I think they have more coating on them. They're just a better lens. Now today, we're going to look at the Konica 40mm F1.8. And this is not a unique lens, but it's an interesting lens. It doesn't have quite the length of a standard lens. It's 40 millimeters. Standard lens usually 50. It has a fast 1.8 aperture, and so it can do a little more than your standard 50 millimeter f2 lens. You can get just a little wider field of vision when you're using this lens, and if you're using it and adapting it to a mirrorless camera and using a cropped sensor, it will behave like a 60 millimeter lens, kind of like a longer standard lens. And if you're using full frame, you'll get just a little wider view. It's not a wide angle lens, but it's certainly a little wider than your standard lens. The other thing about this lens is it's got a very narrow profile. I don't think you can call it a true pancake lens. It's a little wide for that, but it's very easy to handle and very easy to work with. What we're going to do with this lens is look at it a little more closely. We're going to take some pictures with this lens, see how it performs, and then talk about where you can get them, about how much they'll cost, and what they're really nice for. So stay tuned. We're looking at the Konica 40mm F1.8. As you can see, this Konica Hexanon 40mm is a distinctive lens. It's a well-built lens, has a metal barrel and a metal mount, and solid construction throughout. Now there is some debate as to whether or not Konica actually manufactured this lens. I've heard that it could have been made by Tokina or Tamron, and these are two Japanese optical companies that not only marketed their own lenses, but made a lot of third-party lenses for other companies. They also contracted with some of the larger Japanese optical houses to do work when it came to lens production. Now the lens is generally thought of or referred to as a pancake lens due to its narrow profile. It's about 28 millimeters wide, a little over an inch. And while that's pretty narrow, I don't think it's narrow enough to be considered a true pancake lens. But it certainly is easy to handle, and it's not a large lens at all. It's got a 55 millimeter diameter, and it's very easy to use. Now the 40 millimeter length makes it slightly wider than most standard lenses, but it's not wide enough to be considered a wide angle lens. If you're using a full frame camera or a 35 millimeter camera, you'll get a little wider shot, and many photographers like this. It allows for you to get a little more of the surroundings in. As I said in the introduction, if you're using a cropped sensor on a mirrorless camera, it's going to give you an effective length of about 60 millimeters, so just slightly longer than a standard lens. What we're going to do is we're going to use a full frame mirrorless camera and take some pictures with this lens, see how it performs, and then we'll be back to wrap this up. Stay tuned. We've had the opportunity to look a little more closely at the Konica Hexanon 40mm F1.8. It's a wonderful little lens, easy to use, handles nicely. The narrow profile makes it easy to work with. Now these lenses are readily available. You can get them at all the normal places, eBay, thrift stores, estate sales, secondhand stores. Pricing does vary with this lens. If you find one at an estate sale or a secondhand store, you may get it as low as $20. On eBay, you may see them going up for as much as $100. They're probably worth $100. They're a very nice little lens. Now, I would keep an eye out for them at estate sales because Konica coupled this lens with some of their SLRs. So sometimes you'll find this lens on an old camera, and at estate sales, old film cameras, they're usually very reasonably priced. Another nice thing about this lens is it's very easily adapted to mirrorless cameras. You can get adapters on eBay for less than $20 that make this a very easy lens to adapt to mirrorless cameras. They work well, and they're also great for video. As I said, they're a little better than a standard 50mm lens because they have a little wider field of vision. So look out for these lenses and give them a try. They're reasonably priced and easy to use. Thanks for watching.